Welcome to this episode of Star Wars Declassified, where we look into different facts and stories revolving around the Star Wars canon universe and lore. This week we'll be looking into the Rebel Alliance of the original trilogy and the Resistance from the Sequel Trilogy and what exactly sets them apart. Now, it's no secret that both organizations share similarities, as they are each underground movements against a much larger force of galactic terror. They share similar ships, similar leaders, some uniform designs, and even use the same insignia. So looking at the surface, it's not that much of a surprise that most casual fans of Star Wars would initially struggle to tell the two apart. However, when looking deeper at both these factions, you really start to notice the major differences, which we'll get into. First up, the Rebel Alliance. Known also as the Alliance to Restore the Republic, it was an underground movement formed by Senators Bail Organa and Mon Mothma to oppose the reign of the Galactic Empire. While initially small and fragmented due to the rebellion being made up of many different separate rebel cells around the galaxy, by the Galactic Civil War, majority of those cells would come together and unite as the Rebel Alliance. The leadership of the Rebel Alliance was the Alliance Council, known as the Alliance High Command. This leadership council was headed by Chancellor Mon Mothma, and also included Senator Bail Organa, General Yando Dana, Admiral Raddus, Senator Tinra Pamelo of Terrace, Senator Vas Vaspar of the Taldot sector, amongst many more generals, commanders, and senators secretly supporting the alliance. As the Galactic Civil War would continue, the council would grow to include many more high-ranking individuals. The Alliance High Command decided the ins and outs of the rebellion and tried to run things very formal, which saw some soldiers in the field complain that it attempted to manage the rebellion more as a government rather than a military operation. Because of the many powerful individuals supporting the Alliance, the rebels were very well funded considering their circumstance. Of course, only when compared to the might of the Galactic Empire, which was literally the government of the known galaxy, would the rebellion always be considered weaker in terms of resources. But otherwise, compared to any other faction at the time, they were one of the strongest and most recognized. Especially later in the Galactic Civil War when more systems started the side of the Alliance. The Alliance's funding came from three sources: sympathetic planets and/or governments, sympathetic individuals, and piracy. The original founders of the Rebel Alliance, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, were wealthy dignitaries who started the initial funding. As the rebellion eventually grew, more wealthy individuals along with entire planetary governments would join the cause in dedicating their fortunes to overthrow the Empire. In addition, the rebels also took advantage of straight-out piracy, attacking Imperial shipping and hit-and-run raids, both to disrupt Imperial supplies and operations, and to confiscate desperately needed materials. It's because of the financial backing of the Alliance that saw the rebellion put together entire fleets, vehicles, and even bases. After all, the rebels were able to create over 8 known different bases in canon, while in Legends they had nearly over 100 to their name. Due to the strong financial backing, the rebels were actually able to construct vehicles of their own from scratch, such as the MLC-3 light tank and the ultra-light assault vehicle, and even the Freerunner, one of the strongest armored vehicles in the Alliance. Of course, in addition to this, the Rebellion were also able to purchase other vehicles and ships like the T-2B repulsor tank, as well as salvage Old Republic and Separatist military equipment in order to build an extremely impressive military force. Now, while we don't know how large the Rebel Alliance army was, given the fact that the Rebel Alliance was formed from rebel cells around from the entire galaxy, with each cell ranging from the tens to the thousands range, along with judging the rebel troops present in each of the ground battles against the Empire throughout the Galactic Civil War, it's safe to say that the rebels had tens of thousands of troops ready for battle, especially in sieges like the liberation of Sullust shortly after the Battle of Hoth, where thousands of Alliance troops entered open warfare with Imperial forces and won. In final, the Rebel Alliance, while not originally treated as a threat to the Empire before the Battle of Yavin, soon quickly later asserted themselves as a feared major opposition to the Empire's goal of galactic domination. Next up, we have the Resistance. Unlike the Rebel Alliance, it was a small paramilitary force founded by Leia Organa to combat the First Order. As Poe Dameron actor Oscar Isaac once pointed out when asked the difference between the Rebellion and the Resistance, he said, "One is to rebel against, so it's an offensive action. Resisting is on the defensive. The big difference is that the Resistance is even more cornered. There's less of them and it's slightly less organized." Which is very true. The leadership of the Resistance was also very small, not as organized as the Rebellion. Instead of having 30 members each discussing and voting on plans to action like the Alliance High Command did, the Resistance was only made up of Founder General Leia Organa, Major Taslin Brands, and Admiral Uo Statura, as well as retirees forced back into action like Admiral Gail Akbar, General Cypress, and Major Colleen Emat. A leadership made up of only 6 individuals as compared to the 30 of the Rebel Alliance, with Vice Admiral Holdo joining the Resistance soon after the destruction of Starkiller Base, which made the Resistance leadership total count go up to only 7 individuals. The decision-making of the Resistance was also a lot less bureaucratic and instead came down more to a boots-to-the-ground type of approach. Financially speaking, the Resistance was not very well off, whom unlike the Rebellion, the Resistance did not have a long list of financial backers and had to work with what little they had. Leia herself, while still considered a well-off political leader, had nowhere near the wealth that her father Bail Organa had when he co-founded the Rebellion, who he himself had resources from the entire planet of Alderaan to use. Gail Akbar, coaxed out of retirement by Leia, also had nowhere near the same presence he once commanded during the Galactic Civil War, which allowed the Mon Calamari both financial and military support to the Rebellion. Initially, it was simply Leia alone financially supporting the Resistance, which was her own personal project being worked on the side due to her fear of the First Order's operations in the unknown regions, and the New Republic's inability and haste to do anything about it. Eventually later, the New Republic would also offer to secretly help fund the Resistance, but even then those funds were really nothing to write home about. Also, because of the limited resources, the Resistance, unlike the Rebellion, were unable to build their own bases, but rather relied on using old Rebel locations for their own base of operations. And to give perspective on how broke the Resistance were, it was even unable to properly outfit all of their troops for war, with some having been forced to wear semi-pilot gear into open battle. In regards to the Resistance military, it was extremely small and not even half of what the Rebel Alliance had available to them. Considering that the First Order only had 10,000 troops after the Battle of Starkiller Base, and the Resistance was still not strong enough to engage in open warfare with the First Order, really speaks volumes on how minuscule and poorly equipped they were. To put into perspective on how tiny and undermanned the Resistance was in terms of manpower, they did not even have enough actual people to man their capital ships, rather relying on droids to do majority of the work. In addition to their tiny ground forces, the Resistance also had no armored vehicles other than the Geon 211, which was more of a patrol speeder than anything really used for military combat. However, just like the Rebellion who salvaged old Clone Wars vehicles, the Resistance did the same by reusing old Rebel Alliance ski speeders, which were used in the Battle of Crate against the First Order. Furthermore, the Resistance Navy was also heavily limited in terms of options when compared to the Rebels, having only X-Wings and A-Wing starfighters along with a few limited number of Y-Wings at their disposal. And unlike the Rebels who heavily modified their starfighters, each of the Resistance starfighters were simply those exactly used already by the New Republic Navy, which helped save on costs. Arguably, the most impressive vessels in the Resistance Navy were the BSF-17 heavy bombers, but even those were on short supply. In conclusion, the only major similarities between the Rebellion and the Resistance was that both were underground operations, had the same insignia of the Starbird, and that 3 of the 6 Resistance leaders also served the Rebels in some shape or form in the past. However, the Rebel Alliance was clearly the more powerful and organized faction between the two, with a stronger financial and military backing along with overall leadership which saw the Rebels overthrow the Galactic Empire. The Resistance on the other hand were weaker in all areas and only compared in strength to a single Rebel cell, rather than the entire Rebel Alliance. But if that's said, it makes perfect sense of the story. The Resistance may not be as big or impressive as the Rebels were, but they are fighting the First Order and not the Galactic Empire, whom are also a tiny fragment of what the Empire originally was. And that'll do it for today. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel to not only support it, but keep up with Star Wars news, gaming, and canon lore released every week. And consider following me on Twitter and Facebook to never miss out on the latest Star Wars related content. And if you still want to continue the conversation, then definitely join us on our official SYLO Discord channel. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.